Imagine this. Your team member comes to you with a problem. They have way too much work. Deadlines are being missed. They don't have time to dedicate to their other projects. They are laying awake at night stressed about that next urgent email they can't answer. In short, they're drowning. What do you do as their manager? Get them additional resources. But what if there aren't any additional resources? Push back the deadlines. What if you can't push back deadlines? Tell them to better manage their time. What if they're already as efficient as they can be? Being overworked is not an easy thing to solve, but ignoring the issue when your employee tells you they have too much on their plate, or if you see the signs of it without them coming forward, is a recipe to burn out your team. And it can be really easy to dismiss the problem as a time management issue, or worse, easy to say, hey, I did your job once upon a time and I didn't have any problems with it. But you are watching this video because you know that's not the right solution. You know it's your job to help your team manage their workloads and come up with solutions that stave off burnout. So, how do you identify overwork on a team? How can you determine if it's an issue of time management, skills, or simply too many projects? How do you alleviate some of that stress? And what do you do when your own leadership pushes back? Welcome to Manage This, a series for everyone playing manager in the middle. I'm your host, Mandi Gosling. Each episode, we help managers tackle everyday problems that seem to pop up when you're both leading a team and being managed in return. This is your Overwork Survival Guide, how to actually help your team when they're burning out. I had the opportunity to chat with Julie McCarthy, a professor of organizational behavior and HR management at the University of Toronto, who studies workplace resilience and stress. And unfortunately, right now, it's a really rich time to be studying stress.
The evidence is actually very clear, and it's quite concerning. Post-pandemic, we're seeing that levels of stress and anxiety continue to rise among our population. We had hoped that might change, that given hybrid work and all sorts of other new things that have been introduced into the corporate world, that we might actually see the opposite. But we're actually continuing to see levels of stress and anxiety go up, particularly in our younger generations.
1 in 4 working Canadians said they experienced burnout in the past year, and just half of workers believed their workplaces prioritized preventing burnout. In the US, 29% of employees had experienced work-related stress in the previous month, and nearly 3 out of 5 reported negative impacts of this stress, like a lack of interest and motivation, emotional exhaustion, or physical fatigue.
Some people are saying that burnout is the new baseline. And this is really concerning because it has immediate effects for people's well-being, and it also has concerning effects for the organization's bottom line. People are less productive, they become more disengaged, and ultimately many of them may even leave organizations.
And while 52% of managers said they believe they could identify when a team member was struggling, they can, and they do, get it wrong. The first mistake Julie says managers make is to not recognize your team's limitations.
Sometimes we have a tendency, managers, leaders across many different sectors of organizations, to keep piling work on as it comes in. And it creates this sense of urgency, creating an environment that really isn't conducive to productivity. The second mistake that managers make is assuming that everything is okay among their team members. Often when people are overwhelmed and anxious, some individuals are really adept at hiding it. We call it surface acting. They're also managing their impressions. We don't want our leaders and managers to know that we're feeling overwhelmed and burned out.
We actually chatted with Julie before about the risks of stress and burnout over on our Executive Summary podcast. So if you want to hear more about the very real risks to your employees when they are overly stressed, we have a link in the description. But the Coles Notes version is that a burnt-out employee is a less productive employee. Companies that ignore that emotional exhaustion and anxiety are likely to see trust eroded, increased absenteeism, not to mention higher turnover. In all, while it might be tempting to pile on that extra project to your team because it's in the best interest of the company, it's important to recognize the short-term cost, your employees' mental health, might not outweigh the long-term gains. So how do you identify if your direct report is overloaded? Well, in an ideal scenario, you already know and are ahead of the game in, poof, Manager of the Year.
Continuous communication means really checking in with your employees on a regular basis to make sure that we have an understanding of, their levels of, work, whether or not they're working effectively, whether there are any resources that they need. We really shouldn't be getting to a point where all of a sudden we're finding out that one of our employees is overworked. Because with continuous communication, we know as we go along the levels of work that our employees are experiencing. And so it's really important and really effective.
Spoiler alert, since this will be a continuous theme for the rest of the episode, you have to check in with your employees regularly. If you weren't already doing so, it's time to carve out a bit more time to talk with your employees about how they're doing. The next best scenario is that your employee approaches you and tells you directly, "I have way too much work, please help." But everyone will have different comfort levels, and not everyone actually can admit to being overworked. It can feel like a failure, an embarrassment, or a risk to professional growth.
Burnout has 3 dimensions, and the first is emotional exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion is when we feel depleted, when our energy levels are drained. And this can be both mentally and in a physical kind of way. The second dimension is depersonalization, which we also sometimes call cynicism. And this dimension is where we start to kind of withdraw and detach from things. We have kind of this negative cloud around us, but not just at work, at home as well, unfortunately. And the third is a reduced sense of personal accomplishment. So we actually get a feeling that we're not able to accomplish the goals that we've set at work or our personal goals. And so altogether, that kind of makes up burnout.
You might notice that employee is withdrawing from meetings or is slower to respond to emails. Maybe they're missing a deadline here and there, or they didn't quite meet their sales targets last quarter. Some people become irritable, or perhaps they get upset over something really trivial. But importantly, and Julie cannot stress this enough, it's not always obvious.
So burnout can be difficult because some people are really adept at what we call surface acting, at managing their impressions, managing their emotions, and making it seem like everything's okay.
That means you have to consistently be checking in with your team.
What's really important is for them to come from a place of authenticity and caring. And so simply asking open-ended questions like, how are you doing right now? Is there anything that I can do to support you? Are there any resources that you might need that could help you do your job more effectively?
If someone comes to you and tells you, "I have too much work," or you've observed that they're in that process of burning out, the next step is to identify the root of the problem. For some employees, that will be a skills gap. Maybe they took on a project before they were ready, or perhaps they need training on some new technology. It might actually be a time management problem, though be mindful not to jump to that as the root cause. Or perhaps they're overloaded with work. Here, again, communication is key. Don't be afraid to go through an employee's workload with them, to talk about challenges they might be having. You can ask directly if they feel they have the resources to complete the project. Would additional training help alleviate some of that stress? Can we pair you with someone who has done it before to show you best practices? It's important to park your biases. This will be especially true if you're a manager who used to do the job. Research from our other Rotman faculty has shown that people who've gone through an experience, i.e. someone who did the job in the past, are actually less likely to be compassionate to someone going through that situation now. If you were able to successfully do the job your employee's doing, it might be really easy to slip into the, "well, I did it, so why can't they" mindset.
I think it's really important for managers that we don't make assumptions that because we can handle something or we're viewing a certain situation or an event in a certain way, that others will do the same. And the truth is there's massive variation or individual differences in terms of the way that we think and we work and the values we have.
Once you've accepted that the workload is too much, here Julie has a 5-step plan to help your employee. Okay, technically 6 steps, since step 1 is, again, communication. But for simplicity's sake, let's call step 1 taking the traffic light approach.
The traffic light approach is a straightforward but really effective tool in helping us kind of manage our time and our tasks. And the first is the green. These are things that energize us, things that we want to be leaning into and that we should really be prioritizing and doing right now. The yellow are the things that we need to slow down on. These are the things that aren't as much of a priority right now. We have probably 100 emails in our inbox, so we can look and think, for example, which are the things that can wait? Which are the things that are not an immediate priority that we don't need to lean into at the moment? And finally, the red. What are the things that really, if we take a bird's eye view and take a look at all of the things that are on our plate or all of the things that our teams are doing, which of these can actually be eliminated and completely deleted?
Step 2 is to help prioritize. That starts with helping people delegate.
When bosses are open-minded and intentional about allowing their team members to delegate tasks and to organize things in ways that they best see fit, it increases perceived levels of autonomy, which is one of our basic needs, and it reduces those levels of stress and anxiety for employees.
Next, figure out what can be delayed.
In our current environment, there really is a sense of urgency, and we see this across different organizations, across different levels, that everybody feels that things need to be done immediately. And I think this innate sense of urgency creates this kind of environment where people feel guilty or they feel that they don't have the permission or the autonomy to be able to delay tasks. And we know that when we're in environments that are calmer, that are not always like running around, feeling like completely overwhelmed, we know that people are more productive, they're more creative, their well-being is higher. And so I think it's really important to understand that delaying doesn't mean that you're being lazy or that you're not accomplishing things well, that in many instances, by delaying certain tasks, we're actually increasing our personal efficiency and our personal well-being.
Is that internal report really needed next week? Can that low-stakes project be bumped to the next quarter? Is the launch of a new feature update really set in stone? Fourth, what can be removed entirely?
And so I think it's important to be looking at what is the work that's going on within this organization. Are there any processes or systems that we can actually stop doing and delete and eliminate that would actually streamline things? Because often managers become disconnected from the work that's really being done on the front line. And so they may not recognize that those systems or that, process that was put in 15 years ago is now kind of redundant, or it's outdated or it's not needed. But they don't recognize that because they're not on the front line.
Finally, step 5, take everything from the top.
The final step is this continuous feedback loop where we go right back up to the top. And what's really important, the common theme among this is the communication, where we're working interactively with our employees and our team members to really go through these steps and make sure that we're staying up on it and it's not a one and done.
So great. You've prioritized your employees' to-do list and the tasks seem more manageable. But what happens when you don't have the support from your bosses? Let's be honest here. A lot of workload challenges aren't necessarily coming from you, the direct manager, but your boss or boss's boss. It's a reality that some organizations will ask teams to do more with fewer resources, and that can mean piling on work at unsustainable levels. Or perhaps there's a directional pivot, and suddenly everyone needs to carve out time to work on these new initiatives because the future of the company is in these new markets. But you still have to service your old ones. Whatever the top-down reason, it can be really challenging to support your team when your bosses are the ones piling on the work.
It can be really hard to say no to a leader or manager, but this is something that we need to do in many circumstances. If your manager gives you a project and you know that your team is completely overloaded and overworked, and that by doing this project, the quality and efficiency of your other projects is going to suffer, instead of, a hard no, you can ask your manager and say, listen, can we sit down and talk about this and have a conversation around what it is, all the projects that your team members are doing, and invite your manager or your leader to help you take a look at this and help try to understand where, how can we prioritize and how could this project fit in without jeopardizing the quality or efficiency of the other projects that we have on the go.
And her magic words:
my magic words are, I care about my people. And I believe that if you truly care, if that is part of your value system, it becomes easy to have these conversations with your manager. It becomes easy to push back a little and say, let's sit down and have a conversation about where this new task is going to fit among all the other tasks that my people are doing.
And if you take a stance, you might be surprised to see other managers speaking up as well.
I think that the minute that one individual, that one manager steps up and expresses concerns over workload issues, then it becomes, first of all, a lot easier for other managers to step up. We see that often it takes that first person, and then suddenly we realize, hang on a minute, this isn't just an issue with my team. Actually, 3 or 4 other people have stepped up with workload issues. I also think it's important to create a culture that's very psychologically safe, a culture of care where managers and employees feel like it's a very safe place to be able to express if and when they're experiencing anxiety or burnout, when they're overloaded and there's too many tasks. I think it's a big mistake for managers to think that there's this trade-off between employee well-being and productivity, when really the two go hand in hand. There's an enormous amount of research to show that when employees have lower levels of stress and anxiety, when they are in a psychologically safe environment, when the culture is one that embraces and nurtures employees, that their well-being goes up. When we have organizations that are supporting employees, and employees are feeling energized, they're doing tasks that are exciting, their values are in alignment with the organization. Research shows very clearly that those are the organizations that are more likely to have higher levels of productivity and higher levels of organizational performance.
So, will you speak up at your next managers meeting to tell your boss the work is unsustainable? Can you apply the traffic light model to your own team to help them get things under control? Have you got other topics you'd like us to cover? Chime in the comments and consider subscribing to this series, our whole YouTube channel, or the Rotman Insights Hub. Just click the link in the description to get more thought leadership and research-backed management tips from the Rotman community delivered to your inbox every other week. Thanks for watching.